the more acting work I started to book, because I think I started going into rooms like, cast me, don't cast me, I don't care. I'm making 6 figures, baby.
Hi, and welcome to the Storia podcast where storytellers disrupt. I'm Fabiano Altamura.
And I'm David Noronha.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, download, and leave us that 5-star review. Who do we have today, bro?
She's a personal friend, a former student, alum of Bethel Conservatory of the Arts, and she is a polymath. She is Kelly Lintz, born in the US of A. She's an actress, writer, I would also like to add producer extraordinaire, and she's best known, according to her mini biography on IMDb, and these are just a few of the credits, a few. Icing on the cake here is Miracles from Heaven, Gifted, One Tree Hill, which we'll get to chat about because we hold that in common, and she's married to Mark Lintz. And I don't know how she pulled this off, but she also has 4 kids that we're going to dive into because she has a pretty remarkable family. Kelly,
amazing.
Welcome to the Storia podcast.
So great to be here, guys. Thanks for having me.
And Kelly is so amazing that we're actually going to do a 2-parter with her. What are we going to explore with Kelly today, man?
We're going to explore life, career, what it's like to raise children that are also actors and in the industry and very successful, and what it's like to parent actors in the industry and your faith journey. So we're very excited to have you.
Yeah, and on this first part, Kelly, what we'd love to dive in with you on, because I think, as you said in the pre-interview, is to kind of roll back and to tell a little bit of your story. So we're going to start with your creative journey, your professional life, and then in the second part, we're going to dive into what it means to be not just an actress and writer, producer, but also the mother of creatives and the family life, if you will. So, Kelly, we got to know each other as a student in my screenwriting program, but kind of rewind for me. What was the first moment that maybe you realized that you were called or wanting or yearning to be a crazy creative?
Oh, that's easy. I had a spiritual experience when I was 4 years old.
Wow.
I was in a church play and I had a few lines. And I don't know what I did or what I said, but the audience erupted in laughter. And I knew even at that young age that it was like the good kind of laughter. They were laughing with me, not at me. And I literally have spent the rest of my life, for the last 50 years now trying to reproduce that one moment over and over and over again.
It's funny. It's kind of like crack or some kind of addictive experience. What was your first creative thing?
What I did?
Yeah.
I think it was a school play. I was like 7 or 8, and I was doing, I had a small part in the play King David.
There are no small parts. There are only small actors.
Sorry, that's right. I was a huge actor in a really small play. It was about King David.
Wow. Okay,
Yeah.
So mine was I saw mommy kissing Santa Claus in elementary school. I was the kid.
Literally?
Yeah, no, yeah. So I was the kid. Do you know this number?
I don't.
I know because you're from
I
Europe.
saw mommy kissing Santa Claus.
Yeah,
That's
not a mummy,
traumatizing.
mommy. Yeah.
So, not a mummy. Sorry. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And basically it's this old kind of kitschy song. It's a standard. And I was the kid tiptoeing off the stage. But much like you, I had this kind of electric experience. People really responded, and it just goes straight to the brain. It rewires you immediately. Okay. So you have this seminal experience when you're 4 years old. Fast forward, did this take shape in middle school, high school? How did it take shape for you?
Well, just picture me becoming like Leah Michele on Glee before there was Glee for my entire childhood. And, my parents had no idea what to do with me. So it looked a lot like a lot of community theater, a lot of school plays. And then like, what do we do with her? I guess we'll send her to college for acting, I guess.
Wow.
And so that's what they did. And I got a degree in performance from Penn State University. And things progressed from there, though not very linearly.
Okay. Well, I'm intrigued by the nonlinear. Another thing we have in common, I went to school in Pennsylvania as well.
Did you?
Yeah. Talk to us a little bit about, Fab and I, because we train artists, we're always curious as to the environment in which you were trained. And what was it like at Penn? What was the culture like? How did that, and were you a believer?
Yeah, I was one of those people that grew up in Christian school, going to church Sunday morning, Wednesday night, Sunday night, went to graduated in a class of 42 from a Christian high school. And so I had a lot of Jesus. And as a lot of people do when they get out on their own, and I did, is I kind of went a little nuts, little nutty 5,000 for a couple of years where I had to find myself. And then I realized, what am I doing? I was miserable and I didn't know why. And I literally heard a voice in my head one morning in my dorm room that said, hey, maybe it's because you've completely cut me out of your life. And I got involved with a student ministry at Penn State that really taught me how to make my faith my own as an adult. And it changed my life. It really did. And as I was, working in the theater department, which it's funny, that's a very contrary environment to a student ministry. And actually, my nickname in the department was God's girlfriend. I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but it's the truth. And I wasn't shy about my faith, but I definitely felt a little bit like I did not fit in at all. And so as I got toward graduation, I felt the still small voice saying, hey, you're not going to go to New York after graduation like you thought. You're going to go work for this organization. That's what I'm asking you to do. And for all of my senior year, that voice was whispering to me, think eternal, trust me. And it took me a minute to, remember, you're talking about somebody that had had a dream since she was 4 years old. And so giving that up to go work full time in ministry was a process.
How long was that for?
So
how long were you from graduating college? You thought you were going to leave to become an actress. Like how long did you work for that ministry before you then decided to go back into the profession?
Well, it's interesting because I didn't really know what I was going to do with that ministry. And so they placed me at their international headquarters, which was in Orlando, Florida. And never had I ever thought about going to Orlando, Florida in my whole life.
It's the epicenter of high culture and profound art, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, when people leave drama school, most people do say, all right, I'm headed to Orlando.
Headed to Disney.
And you're right, exactly. But what I found when I got there was that there are a lot of through a story I probably don't have time to tell today, but I got connected to a pocket of artists there because we'll always find each other, right? Mm-hmm. And I realized that Central Florida was very much the commercial capital of the country because it's always warm there. So ad agencies would come there in the wintertime and they would shoot commercials. And because, like we said, not many people are heading there after drama school, the talent pool was relatively small. And so I was able to get an agent and get my SAG card within about 9 months while I was still working for this ministry.
Wow.
And so I worked for them for about 5 years, but slowly started to build my career as an actor simultaneously. And luckily, they were really great about letting me go do both. And I found what was a phenomenal secret backdoor into the industry that I never would have found. And people, all my friends from school started calling me saying like, did I just see you on a Super Bowl commercial? And I'm like, you did. And they're like, we can't even get agents. We can't get arrested here. And I think as of now, as far as I know, I'm like one of the only people I know that I went to school with that's still in this industry because I listened to where the Lord had me go. Wow. And it seemed like he was sending me south when I wanted to go north, but he was sending me to the exact right place. And so for 10 years, that's what I did. I worked there and I started getting smaller parts in television series that were shooting on, the backlot of Universal Studios and some small film roles. And then about 10 years after that, again, he's like, all right, we're done here. It's time for you to go to Atlanta. And I was like, wait, hang on a second. Like everything's going so well. And I just starred opposite Kermit the Frog in a Muppet film. Like, I don't understand. And he was like, do we really need to have this conversation again? And I'm like, okay, all right, no. So we moved to Atlanta having no real reason to do so.
What year was this, Kelly?
This was right after 9/11 in 2002, early 2002.
That's the Lord, because I'm not quite sure that any agent or manager would be saying, you should head after Orlando, Atlanta, Georgia. I mean, it's prescient, but obviously it's the omniscience of God.
What do you think it was? Why Atlanta?
Well, we did have family there.
Okay.
And my husband was a graduate of Auburn University. And so we would always drive through Atlanta on our way to Auburn to, go to football games, that's another story in and of itself. Like, I married somebody that's not in the arts at all. And every time we would go through Atlanta, I'm like, gosh, this is such a pretty place. Like, I would love to live here, but like, why would we live here? Right. Except for your family's here. And, we just didn't have any kind of career reason to move there, but we just knew that we were supposed to go. And I was doing a play called I Hate Hamlet for the Orlando Shakespeare Festival. And my mother-in-law messaged me and said, hey, I found your house in Atlanta. Do you want to come see it? And I was like, she's hilarious. And on our dark day, we had 2 dark days, and we drove up. And as we left the bank from signing the papers, I looked at my husband and I was like, hey, do you think we should pray about whether we should move to Atlanta or not? And we were there on the ground floor of everything that Atlanta has become. And then that's when my children followed me into the industry. They were really young at that point. I had 3 kids at the time. 1 more would be born. And they all got their start in the Atlanta market.
Wow. So you were there so you just left, you were there 21 years. When was it that you started to see the increase in film production in the arts in Atlanta? Because I mean, I know Trilith is 8, 9 years old. So what were you doing before that?
Yeah, in the early days.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, this was back in the day before self-taping was a thing, where you had to actually be in the room. But there were a lot of agents in Atlanta. But I literally spent all of the 90s driving to New Orleans, Savannah, Charleston, Wilmington, North Carolina. Going physically to auditions in the Southeast region, because what would happen is they would have their lead cast, but they wouldn't want to bring everybody in from Los Angeles because they needed to save money. So they were hoping that some talented people lived in the Southeast. And there was a whole contingent of us that I think wisely stayed there to snap up those roles. And I really credit my entire career to the magic of being a bigger fish in a smaller pond in the regional market. And, there was a glass ceiling that a lot of my friends that were in New York.
No, I was going to, sorry, I interrupted you. I was saying, and having people probably like Mark Fincannon, really being in the corner of believers there, which would be amazing, right?
Mark is a dear friend that I met in Orlando. He came once to do a workshop there. And one of your questions that you had said you wanted to ask me was, how do you balance faith with being an actor? And I did a workshop with him right at the very beginning of my career. This is like 30 years ago now. And I said, I could tell he was a believer. And
how could you tell? I'm curious.
Just a few. That was a long time ago, but a few things he said in the workshop let me kind of clued me in. And so when I went in to have my private read with him, I said, I can tell you're a Christian, and one of the things I'm worried about is navigating my faith with this industry. And then I did my audition for him, and he's like, "Well, you better learn to navigate it because I think you could work." So Mark has been a champion of our family for a long, long time.
Going back to the big fish in a small pond thing, there was a study that was done around just colleges and universities where you'll have these high school graduates that are valedictorians, salutatorians, at the top of their class in their high schools. And so they get into these Ivy League schools and they go. And immediately what happens is they're now a small fish in a very big pond of piranhas and sharks, just people that are at the top of their game. And they've done psychological studies on this. People that are like pursuing PhDs, those that actually do the counterintuitive thing, what Kelly's done, and I know it was under the guidance of the Lord and the voice of the Lord, but you ended up being a big fish in smaller ponds, being able to gobble up all of these opportunities and work because there wasn't anybody else that had kind of the foresight, if you will, or the insight from God to arrive early. But in these studies, time and time again, what they've seen is that people give up on their dreams if they end up just landing in these massive towns. It's just so hard to compete. And when you're first starting out and you have no momentum and you're still trying to answer the question, and so many of our listeners, so many of our students come with this very question, do I have what it takes? And I have to imagine that might, and I mean, it sounds like you credit that kind of traction and momentum in the early phases of your career for giving you the longevity of your career.
100%.
Kelly,
100%. Like,
talk to us a little bit about, so now you're in Atlanta. You described it as the ground floor. And what she's describing is that as we talked about in an earlier episode of Storia this season, Atlanta has just gone through a massive, massive explosion. It is on track to be one of the number one. It already is one of the top production cities in the world, on track to surpass those legacy cities like New York and LA soon. Talk to us a little bit. Did you ever doubt? Did you ever wonder, should I have gone to LA or New York? Did you ever have any dark nights of the soul, to quote Blake Snyder, screenwriter that you are?
Oh my gosh. I think the entire artist's life is a dark night of the soul. But yeah, I mean, when it really started to hit me that like maybe I did make the wrong decision was when my children started getting into the industry, because before they got into the industry, I was feeling pretty darn good about myself because I was working pretty consistently. And again, when I say that, I mean, like only 6% of all actors actually make a living, a full-time living. I was still having to hustle with a lot of other extra streams of income, which is always my first thing that I advise anybody that's going to get into this industry is like, even if you're great, chances are you're not going to make a full-time living. You've got to have something else going on. So, but I was feeling pretty good about myself. Well, then my children got into the industry, and children get higher level opportunities at much younger ages because it's much harder to find talented child actors. So my children started working in the Atlanta market, and pretty quickly some representatives in Los Angeles kind of snapped them up, and they started landing, leads in feature films. And then we would do things like when they were pretty young, I would go out there before self-taping was a thing, and we would do pilot season, right?
Yeah.
So I would be living in like a 1-bedroom apartment with air mattresses, me and 4 kids slogging it out there. That's a dark night of the soul. And it was really frustrating for me because I had, their agent was sending them out, and I would go, but it was difficult for me to get an agent out there because I was old. They already had their people. And so I hit a glass ceiling, and I would be sitting in these waiting rooms with my kids, and I would see women that looked just like me that I knew I could give just as good of a read as, and I just couldn't get in the room. So that has been maybe one of the only times that I'm like, wow, maybe I should have come out here and tried to make it happen. But on the other hand, I know so many people that did that are, similarly, talented and really talented that are just sat at home.
Yeah. I mean, we encourage all of our students to move to Atlanta now because there's that stat that I read in a publication that by 2027, Atlanta will be outproducing LA, and it's kind of now is still at season to move there. But you mentioned, I'm kind of paraphrasing this, but multiple other streams of income. What else did you do to provide a living for your family whilst you were acting?
Well, I ended up coaching a lot of child actors because I was my own kid's coach. Because I figured if I can't teach them what to do, then I'm in the wrong business, right? Yeah. And my kids started to really work a lot. And so I started having a lot of moms reach out to me and be like, hey, can you help us do with our kids what you've done with yours? So that turned into a pretty thriving child acting coaching business, consulting business in Atlanta. I also, was a brand representative for some health and wellness products. I still do that. Made it to the top of that company and have a 6-figure income from that. Wow. And I started to do that because, and this might be more, appropriate for part 2. But what happened was when all of my kids started working so much, there was a real problem that developed in that you're sitting on set with them because you have to be. And we didn't want to send a guardian with our kids. It was important to us that we were the ones there with them. So my husband would be in Los Angeles for 5 months with one of them, and
Wow.
I'd be in like Budapest, Hungary with another one. And we would get on the phone and be like, quick question, who's at home paying the mortgage? And it became a real problem. And so that's when I turned to, my network marketing career. And I kind of thought, oh, geez, I can't believe I'm doing this. But the higher I went in that company, the more acting work I started to book, because I think I started going into rooms like, cast me, don't cast me. I don't care. I'm making 6 figures, baby.
It's funny when you don't need the money, how
100%.
much more relaxed you can be.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. I credit my move to Reading in pursuit of Jesus also because of the repellent nature of my cynicism and my desperation. I think I was literally, sweating desperation in the room towards those last days when it got rough. I always joke that LA, when I say LA, I mean kind of Hollywood, loves what it can't own. Mm-hmm. And so when you go in there like a boss, they immediately get fascinated. I mean, I've shared this story before, but I remember being on the set of The Mentalist, and somehow the director or somebody had found out that I lived in Northern California. They didn't know that it was actually Reading. Northern California sounds way sexier than that. And I was, they said, so what do you do? How do you work? I said, well, I come down when I need to. I wasn't trying to make it sound super sexy, but it kind of did. And then I described this Norman Rockwellian town with Canadian geese flying over. And suddenly I was like a point of interest on set because they were fascinated. And this was in the early days, it's pre-COVID when everybody basically left and it was the diaspora of artists. Kelly, before we land this episode on you, there's just a couple more things that Fab and I want to dive into you with. Often we're enamored by the bios, by the Instagram pictures, by the kind of veneer of success, but I haven't met one artist that doesn't have so much more under the surface of the water. It's like that iceberg thing. It sounds like you've had to navigate some pretty tough times personally as a creative.
Sure.
What have those tough times taught you? What have you learned through those moments of pain, lack, doubt?
Probably, and I think it's a dragon that I have to slay every day, is where does value come from? Where does our worth come from? Does it come from the role I just booked, the role that my child actor just booked, or does it come from just being a princess of the kingdom? And I've really had to keep handing my goals, my dreams over again and again and again to remember what's really important. And that is eternity, and that this is all going to go away. It's all going to go away. None of this lasts. I could win an Oscar tomorrow. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's a similar theme. I mean, I think I've heard you share, having struggled through that. I know I have as well. I've heard you tell a story of your identity and value swinging like a pendulum just based on whatever the most recent credit is. Mm-hmm.
It's funny, isn't it? Because when you do something you love that specifically you feel the Lord has called you to, there is an element of identity that you find in the work that you do, right? Because we're not going to lie, it is fulfilling to some extent, and being in the center of what God has called you to do is really beautiful. Even if the material isn't great, you're like, wow, this makes me feel alive. But I think whenever we derive worth from that, it's where the problem is, because we can only derive worth from our identity in Christ.
Yeah, it's so funny how they become one. Like, I mean, I can't even claim, though we teach on this, like you said, it's a dragon that you've got to slay every day. It's this ephemeral thing, because I think as an artist, your canvas, your elements, your brush, your paint is you. It's your heart, it's your emotion, it's your thoughts, it's your body. It's, specifically in terms of acting, but even in terms of writing as well, you have to bring yourself to the work, and I think it can be pretty confusing. I don't know an artist that isn't trying to follow Jesus, that isn't wrestling with this particular topic. Listen, I'd be remiss. I mean, you have a biography. I mean, you should just look up Kelly. I mean, she's been working forever, and she has so many credits. But I'm also really excited for you to share for a few minutes on your newest, and I think really cool chapter. So Kelly came to me for a 1-year screenwriting program, but she was such a pro that we kind of hand selected certain courses. She's a working woman with so many different responsibilities. So we kind of cobbled together this specific program for you. She studied with me for a year. She was a standout from the beginning. I mean, just, the moment that you read the one-line description from a writer, you can tell whether or not their story is going to pop. So you spent a year with us. Tell us a little bit of some of the exciting things that have happened just after 1 year at BCA as not an actress, but as a screenwriter.
Yeah, well, I came to you guys because actually this ties into the one thing that, as you guys were talking, popped into my mind that I think your listeners really need to be aware of. And that is that fame does not equal happiness. The closer that we have gotten to fame and my children have gotten to fame, the more I've had to navigate their mental health.
Wow.
And so that helped me as well to be like, it's all a lie. My son was on a show that was nominated for an Emmy, and he got to go to the Emmys as a series regular for that show. He said it was the loneliest night of his life.
Isn't that ironic?
So it's so ironic. And so I think that helps me too to realize, like, just really appreciate the everyday, because you'll always have that. And if you can appreciate that, you're really going to feel rich inside. But that truth was what led me to want to start writing, because I had a blog for a long time that served stage parents about all the lessons that I've learned. And I would share things like, hey, fame doesn't equal happiness, by the way. And I started to get the idea that, wow, that would make a pretty interesting scripted series, sort of this conservative family that is navigating the shark-infested waters of Hollywood and is learning all these important truths that most people need to know. And so my husband was like, well, you're a great writer. Why don't you write that series? And I said, I don't know how to write a series. I've been on a lot of series and I've read a lot of scripts, but I don't think that means I know how to write a screenplay. I better learn. And so that's how I came to you guys. And I actually found, again, the still small voice. I was looking at MFA programs, trying to find something that would fit. And a friend of mine, Tiffany Lively, that I went to high school with.
Oh, wow. You went to, oh my goodness.
I did.
Wow.
She's an old friend of mine. And it's not like we talk all the time. We're connected, but not all the time. And in the December of 2021, she just sent me a YouTube video randomly and just said, "This is great." And no other explanation of what it was at all. She had no idea that I was searching for an MFA program. And it was the holidays. And so I was like, well, I'm sure it's great, Tiffany, but it's the holidays and I can't watch every YouTube video that comes my way. But that January, I was really praying hard that, God, if you want me to write this stuff, you have to help me find somebody that can teach me how to do it the right way with excellence. And the still small voice said, go watch that video that Tiffany sent you. And I was like, huh? Okay. And it was you two.
Wow.
And you guys were talking.
Gosh.
You guys were, I don't know if it was this podcast or if it was just
Chris
an
Valentin's
interview.
podcast, was it?
No, I mean, not back in 2021.
I think you two were being interviewed and you were talking about this program that you had started. And I was like, I wonder if that could be it. Because one of the other reasons that I wanted to start writing is that, you have Hollywood that you find yourself saying, well, it's a great story if they weren't pushing that agenda on me and it was not basically porn. And you have the faith-based world, the inspirational world that really means well,
It means well. That's a very,
it means well.
I love it's so funny. Everybody now can't call it faith. It's inspirational. It's inspirational.
We've
call
diluted it even.
Well, no, we call it inspirational.
Stories of hope.
Yeah, I was talking. I was talking with Bev Holloway, who cast The Chosen, and she was saying that it's inspirational stuff, which I actually prefer than faith based.
Actually, yeah, fair enough.
It's way, but I love what you said afterwards.
Well, in the South, there's a sweet little expression. You just say, "Bless their hearts."
Bless their heart.
Bless their heart.
They mean well. They mean well.
Yeah, so you're like, well, it's a great story if they could just get the production value and the writing and the acting where it needs to be. And I'm like, what if I could?
Yeah, I just love your humility because, I mean, here's a woman that's been in the industry from so many different perspectives. As a mother, as an artist herself, has clocked tens of thousands of hours. When she says that she's read some scripts, I mean, she has triple the career that I have. I mean, this probably means she's read 10,000 scripts. Easy. Scenes, I mean, at least scenes, like tons and tons of stuff. And yet she had the humility. I mean, I can't tell you how many people come to me and say, I've never done a lick of anything. I haven't even written a skit at church, but I have an idea for a movie. And I say, yeah, you should go read a couple books before. Yeah. But Kelly understood because she, like, we always joke, you wouldn't allow somebody to do brain surgery on you just because they received a prophetic word. And I think you understood because you've stood right on so many professional high-level sets. You had respect for the craft. So not only did Kelly, she was such a diligent student, but we began a professional relationship outside of BCA. Leave us on a little bit of a cliffhanger here before we segue to part 2 in a little bit. Just give us a little bit of a glimpse into what you've been able to accomplish just on the other side of graduating from BCA. What do you have in the works, Kelly?
Well, the screenplay that I wrote as a student at BCA led to me being hired to write my first screenplay that will be in production.
Come on.
And
I'm so proud right now.
Dude, that's so cool.
See, now I get
How's
to be
that for a cliffhanger?
This is the pride that Fab feels when our actor showcases get somebody. This is how I feel right now. I'm gleaming and beaming. And on that note, it's such a pleasure to get to hang out with you, Kelly. Please stick around for part 2. We can't wait to dive into your world as a creative, a mother, a wife, and someone who's raised stars in her own right. Kelly, thanks for hanging out with us at Storia Podcast.
Kelly. Thank you.
And we'll see you guys soon.
It's been great.